So, in 2026, this really strange conflict kicked off that pretty much challenged everything we thought we knew about modern war. It's a wild story where some of the most powerful weapons ever created were made totally useless by groceries. This is the story of the nuclear paradox and how a nuclear-armed state got fought to a standstill.
Okay, so let's just get right to it. The big question, the thing we're calling the logic gap. How on earth does a nation with a full nuclear triad, we're talking about 170 warheads, advanced fighter jets, a million-person army, how do they lose their own sovereign territory to light infantry? I mean, this is the fundamental puzzle that frames this entire explainer.
Well, the answer is kind of buried in this grim bit of theory called the stability-instability paradox. See, the idea is this. Pakistan's nukes create stability at the highest level. They prevent an all-out war with, say, India. But, and this is the crucial part, that very stability creates instability at the lower levels. An enemy knows Pakistan is never ever going to use a nuke over a border skirmish. It makes that giant nuclear umbrella surprisingly leaky.
To really get our heads around how this whole paradox played out, we're going to break this down into 5 parts. First, we'll dig into that nuclear logic gap. Then, we'll look at the bizarre economic trigger, the tomato tipping point. After that, we'll analyze the 2 opposing military campaigns, then map out the huge geopolitical shift that's happening, and finally, look at the very fragile truce that put everything on pause.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, the nuclear logic gap. This is where we really start to see how Pakistan's biggest strength actually became a massive vulnerability on the ground.
And you can see that mismatch perfectly on this slide. I mean, it's profound. Pakistan's military is built for what's called full-spectrum deterrence. A big conventional war between states. They've got the jets, the satellites, the tanks, but the problem is they were fighting an asymmetric enemy using hybrid warfare. The Taliban and TTP were all about human intelligence, knowing the local terrain, and just a brutal strategy of wearing Pakistan down. It really is the classic case of bringing a sledgehammer to a knife fight.
And that mismatch leads us straight to our second section, because this war didn't start with tanks rolling across the border. Nope, it started with a border closure and the total collapse of a supply chain. This is the story of the tomato tipping point.
So back in October 2025, Pakistan sealed its borders, thinking it could strangle Kabul's economy, but the result was an absolute catastrophic blowback. And it can be summed up with this one number, a 400% spike in the price of tomatoes. You see, the first people to get hurt by this strategy weren't in Afghanistan. They were ordinary Pakistani citizens in their own grocery stores.
And as you can see here, it was way more than just tomatoes. Onions, wheat, all the basics, prices went through the roof. This actually sparked food riots in major cities, forcing the government to fight a crisis at home right when it was trying to look tough abroad. And it showed a huge difference in the threshold of pain. The Taliban's economy was way more resilient than Pakistan's urban middle class.
And forget the social chaos for a second, the financial damage was just immense. This border closure, which was supposed to cripple Afghanistan, ended up costing Pakistan's own economy about $177 million in lost exports every single month. The whole economic pressure campaign just backfired spectacularly.
So, with the economic plan in tatters, Islamabad did what states often do. They turned to military force. And this kicked off a war of 2 totally different, competing military operations right on the Duran line.
On one side, you had Pakistan's Operation Ghazab-ul-Haq, or Wrath for Justice, a very high-tech campaign using air power and long-range strikes. And on the other side, you had Afghanistan's Operation Rad al-Zul, or Repelling the Oppression, a classic asymmetric campaign focused on ground attacks and capturing territory to score these big symbolic wins.
Now, Pakistan's operation, which kicked off in late February 2026, actually looked like it was working at first. They were hitting key targets deep inside Afghanistan, and they claimed to have taken out hundreds of fighters. But, and this is a huge but, it came at a devastating cost. With over 400 civilian casualties, the operation created this massive strategic blowback. It fueled anti-Pakistan anger and basically became the Taliban's best recruiting tool.
And that just perfectly set up the Taliban's counterpunch. They didn't just sit there and take it, they hit back. And they hit back hard. They struck a military headquarters deep inside Pakistan. And then, on March 15th, they captured the Janda Post, a sovereign Pakistani military position. Using captured American night vision gear, they completely humiliated a nuclear power by taking its land. This was the moment it became clear the Taliban weren't just an insurgency anymore, they were operating like a real proto-state military.
This stalemate on the battlefield forced a huge strategic shift, which brings us to our 4th section, the Great Geopolitical Pivot.
This is all about how Afghanistan started literally redrawing the map to cut Pakistan out of the picture for good.
The leadership in Kabul made a really cold-blooded calculation. As long as they were economically dependent on Pakistan's ports, they'd always be vulnerable. So they launched the Pivot, a long-term plan to just reroute their entire trade network away from Pakistan. And this move was a direct shot at Islamabad's decades-long policy of strategic depth, which always depended on having a friendly government in Kabul.
And they're not just talking about it, they're actually doing it. They're boosting trade through Iran's Chabahar port, which is heavily backed by Indian money. They're developing the Wakhan corridor for direct access to China. This has sparked a whole Indo-Afghan reset, with India upgrading its embassy and even calling Afghanistan a contiguous neighbor. The final equation here is pretty simple. A Kabul that doesn't need Pakistani flour or ports is a Kabul that Pakistan cannot control.
Which brings us to our final section. With the fight deadlocked and the whole region being rewired in real time, a totally new set of players had to step in just to broker a pause. These are the new power brokers.
So instead of the US or the UN coming in, it was this diplomatic triangle of three Middle Eastern powers. You had Saudi Arabia playing the role of the banker, using its financial muscle. You had Qatar as the neutral ground, because of its long-standing Taliban political office. And then you had Turkey as the military peer, creating a really important bridge between the two armies.
What we're seeing here is the emergence of what analysts are starting to call an Islamic diplomatic architecture. It's basically a new model for resolving conflict, where regional problems get solved by regional powers, completely outside of the usual Western-led diplomatic channels. This is a huge shift in global power dynamics.
The result of all this was a temporary truce for the Eid holiday, from March 18th to the 24th. But let's be really clear, this was just a pause. It was incredibly fragile, and both sides have already promised they're going to resume operations. The underlying conflict is nowhere near over.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it's that the very nature of power is changing. In 2026, the world learned a really hard lesson. A nuclear umbrella doesn't keep you dry when the rain is made of tomatoes and asymmetric grit. The biggest weapons on the planet don't mean a thing if you can't solve for the price of food, and you can't defeat an enemy who just refuses to play by your rules.